Top 10 striking facts about the real Count Dracula. 1. Dracula soaked bread in a bowl of blood before he ate it. The real Count Dracula may not have sucked the blood from the necks of his victims directly, but he still ate it. The blood of the people he killed flowed into a bowl in which he dipped pieces of bread and other food. Manuscripts from the 15th century mention one horrifying incident in the life of the bloodthirsty count. Vlad Țepeș invited several guests to his castle and, right at the dinner table, impaled them all on a stake. Then he leisurely finished his meal and dipped pieces of bread into the blood that flowed from the bodies of his murdered guests. This was the kind of dessert Dracula enjoyed quite often. 2. He avenged his father by killing hundreds of innocent people. He didn't just kill people, he tortured them by slowly piercing their bellies with a blunt instrument of torture. It is known that Vlad Țepeș spent most of his life in a Turkish prison, and when he was released, he learned that as a result of betrayal by his own people, his father had been buried alive by Hungarian soldiers. Vlad learned that many of the nobles who had served his father had participated in the conspiracy against his father, but he did not know who exactly the traitor was. He had the idea of inviting everyone to his castle and reprisal them. In all, about 500 people gathered for the feast. When the feast was over and the guests dispersed to rest in their rooms, Dracula's soldiers burst into everyone and stabbed the nobles, most of whom were innocent of the old count's death. Dracula continued to use this tactic countless times. Posing as a welcoming host, he would lure people to his home for various festivities and then kill them. Eventually, people knew what it meant to be invited to one of Dracula's feasts, and what they would face there. In any case, however, they accepted his offer because if they refused, they risked being killed immediately. For many, it was a hopeless situation. Either way, a terrible and painful death awaited the people. 3. Dracula means son of the dragon. The name Dracula was not invented by Bram Stoker. The real Vlad Țepeș, indeed, preferred to be called by that name. The bloodthirsty count's father, Vlad II, was a member of a secret society known as the Order of the Dragon. He was so proud of his membership in this society that he even changed his name to Dracula, which means dragon in Romanian. As a child, Vlad Țepeș Jr. was also involved in the secret order. This prompted him to change his own name to Dracula, which means son of the dragon. These days the name of the count is increasingly translated as son of the devil. In any case, such a frightening name was quite compatible with the actions committed by young Dracula. Vlad Țepeș deservedly got the reputation of a bloodthirsty and horrible monster. For Dracula had a great sense of humor. This, indeed, is true. During his life the bloodthirsty count not only killed and tortured his victims. According to those who knew Vlad well enough, he often made quite pointed jokes about this or that occasion. His sense of humor was enviable. He made particularly witty jokes about the unfortunate victims. For example, one of the eyewitnesses of those terrible meals at Dracula's castle later wrote in his memoirs how the count, watching how the unfortunate victims expire, as if casually remarked, "What grace my victims have, how interestingly they move when you put them on the stake." He compared the convulsions of the dying to the movements of a frog. One day another guest of the count came to the castle, filled with corpses. And since the smell of decomposing bodies was in the air, the host politely inquired if the stench disturbed his guest. The wretched man replied that it did. The count then pierced him and hung him from the ceiling, reasoning that the smell under the ceiling was not so bad, and the stench would no longer bother the careless guest. 5. The only punishment was being staked. It is easy to think that Dracula was a lonely and miserable madman who killed people for no reason. However, that is far from the case. The count was administering justice, as horrible as that sounds. In those days, there was only one punishment, regardless of the crime one committed. Both murderers and petty thieves who stole bread from candy stores to keep from starving to death were put to the stake. However, there is at least one known exception to the rule when Dracula used a different kind of punishment. Once, while crossing the territory belonging to the bloody count, a gypsy stole something. Dracula was ruthless this time as well. He boiled the unfortunate thief, after which he forced the other gypsies in the tabor to eat him. 6. He got rid of all the sick and poor by burning them at the stake. In this way the Count tried to bring order to the streets of the city of Targovishte, at that time the capital of Wallachia. One day Tepes invited all the sick, vagabonds and beggars to one of his houses, under the pretext of a feast. After the poor people had had enough to eat, Dracula politely excused himself and left his guests. On his orders, the house was boarded up on the outside so that no one could escape. The house was then set on fire with everyone inside. It is known for certain that not a single person survived the terrible fire that the bloodthirsty Count set. Subsequently, Dracula repeatedly did so, burning entire villages inhabited by poor and sick people. In this inhumane way he cleansed towns and villages of all those whom he considered superfluous in this world. 7. The Golden Cup is a symbol of unlimited power. Vlad Țepeș controlled his people very strictly, suppressing every kind of crime. To prove how powerful his power was and how much the people feared him, he ordered a huge bowl cast from pure gold to be placed in the center of Targovishte. For a long time the bowl was in the very center of the capital of Wallachia. But none of the 60,000 people who lived in the city at that time even dared to touch it. Every resident knew that he was in danger if the cup was stolen. During the entire reign of the Count, no one even touched this symbol of Dracula's power, although the cup was in full view of thousands of people living in complete poverty. This is the kind of fear the name of Vlad Țepeș alone instilled in people. 8. To poison the Turkish invaders, the Count filled his own wells and wells with poison. In the 1400s Wallachia was at war with its neighbors, the Turks. Vlad III, who did not like to lose, sent his army to drive his enemies from his land. But in the end, as a result of a hard fight, the Turks forced Vlad to retreat. Even as he retreated, however, Dracula did not give up. He burned all the villages that were in the way of the Turkish army. He did this with the expectation that his enemies would have nowhere to rest. Dracula went so far as to poison his own water wells. Along with the Turks, thousands of villagers were poisoned. Feelings of compassion and pity were not familiar to Țepeș. All means are good in war, even if innocent people die. 9. In all, Dracula killed more than 100,000 people. Historians claim that up to 100,000 people could have been victims of the bloodthirsty Count. For Țepeș there were no gender, age or status restrictions. He could kill an old man or stake an innocent child. At the same time, he did not shy away from anything and finished his meal in peace. Witnesses said that while they watched in awe at what was happening, the Count was only joking and calmly finishing his lunch or dinner. During the war with the Turks, some 20,000 soldiers of the enemy army were staked. 10. Dracula's body disappeared. The Count, feared and hated by his own people, died on the battlefield during the war with the Turks. His bloodthirstiness played a cruel joke on him. Dracula's army outnumbered the enemy army several times over. However, despite such an obvious advantage, most soldiers decided to go over to the side of the enemy. After all, the enemy camp did not have such harsh punishments as Dracula had. The men, fed up with the cruelty of their ruler, did not hesitate to betray him. Dracula's head was cut off by his own soldiers and then sent to the Turkish Sultan. He, in turn, pierced it with a spear and put it on a stake outside his palace, so that every passerby could see the head of the defeated tyrant. Some historians claim that Dracula's body was then buried in a cemetery in the Snagov monastery outside Bucharest. But there are also conflicting reports that his body was never found, while others say that possible remains were indeed discovered but then disappeared. There is a theory that Dracula's body was buried with all his wealth. Thus, the tyrant's tomb became a good target for looters, who, along with the treasure, tore apart the remains of Țepeș. And the most mystical version is that Dracula's body disappeared by itself, because he was a real dragon. Vlad Țepeș, Count of Wallachia, was a non-standard villain, thinking, suffering, miserable, and lonely. His victims were thousands of people. His whole life was shrouded in mystery. This mystique did not leave the image of Dracula even after his death.